Speak to a business owner down in the state of Georgia, the first state to reopen. Tim Catalfo owns Bantam Pub, a restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia. Tim, it's good to have you with me tonight. Thanks for being on our show.
Good evening, Scott. Thank you.
Can you tell me what the latest is down there, the status of your business?
The weather has been beautiful. We had super great weather during the pandemic, and luckily it's continued with us. We opened on the 27th of April, a Monday, to a pretty good level of business for the conditions, and we have been holding it about 35 to 40%. And it's this week we're actually operating at about last week and this week we're at 50%. Only 60% of our hours open. We've had 28 staff members, and we are down to 7 staff members, 5 from the previous crew, and 2 new staff members that we brought on, and so we are looking to expand.
Interesting. So you actually had some staff members from the old regime, if you will, not come back.
Correct. It's kind of a tough scenario. Obviously, it's all over the news. 68% of the folks getting the unemployment are receiving more money than they would if they were at work. And there's still the fear that the pandemic isn't over yet. And, we're hearing it all day, every day. So I think a lot of the people are taking precaution and waiting to see if the numbers rise. It's still only a few weeks old, but I do believe we'll get a few of our folks back. And from what I'm hearing on the street, there's about 25 to 30% of the local businesses will or have shut and remain shuttered. So we'll be really looking forward to getting some folks back and kind of a more robust business. Our neighborhood is in the old 4th Ward, and they've been kind enough to really support us. Our Cisco representative, Sarah Thurston, has helped us revise our entire menu and given us a heads up on what foods will be available and which ones will be affected through processing and manufacturing and ability for their factories to remain open and supply food.
Interesting. Take us inside. I'm sorry. Take us inside the restaurant. What does it look like? Staffers wearing masks, customers wearing masks, gloves. Put us on the ground in the restaurant.
The staff are wearing masks, gloves, and we've got disinfectant everywhere. We're using a little bit more bleach and disinfectant than under previous conditions to the pandemic. The guests almost never wear a mask in. We're a very small place. Bantam means smallest of class. So, we're 61 in the main room, but it's a very small room. We've dropped to 10 when we initially had to. We've been permitted to go up to 20 in that room. We've got a 1/4-acre property, so I've got a couple buildings spread out and a bar up on the lawn area. So we've been able to have as many as 70 to 80 people at the 10 maximum per table and spread out over the property. So we're actually quickly gaining back a lot of our business, and I'm very optimistic.
Oh, good for you. Were there ever any thoughts that you had that you would never be able to open again?
I'm opening a sports bar called Big Game directly across the street, a non-competing business from my other business. One is a gastro pub, and the Big Game is a sports bar. And while watching television to see that I'd gone to watch our MLS team, Atlanta United, play on Saturday with almost 70,000 fans, and by Monday they had canceled the NCAA basketball tournament and then the NBA, and it was kind of grim at that point. And then they just canceled bars and restaurants. So there was a point where I was very stressed. Well, I think we're going to get past that, and all the indicators look good. Not being a doctor on that level, I don't have any further answers, but I do feel like it is going to come back in a robust manner.
Well, we're glad to hear that. Good to hear you've got some customers coming back. We wish you well.
Thank you so much, Scott.
All right, that's Tim Catalfo joining us. I'll bring back in Dr. Gottlieb. Sounds like a pretty decent success story so far down in Georgia. Dr. Gottlieb, how are you thinking tonight about these reopenings that we've seen?
So far so good, and I think it's important that individuals continue to practice good hygiene, wear masks, engage in social distancing. I think people taking those simple measures on an aggregated scale across the entire population is going to go a long way towards preventing more outbreaks and a resurgence in cases. We're continuing to see the number of hospitalizations and a number of cases go down nationally. Testing's going up quite a bit. The positivity rate, the number of tests that are coming back positive, is continuing to go down. So the national trends look encouraging. Even when you back out the New York tri-state region, which was the bulk of the cases at one point, the national trends continue to look good. Now, there's selected states where we see some cases bumping up. Texas, North Carolina, for instance. We saw hospitalizations bump up a little bit in Florida and Georgia last week. We have to watch that closely. But there's no discernible trend that there is something negatively trending where you're seeing an upsurge in cases in any of these states. And it's things to watch closely. But remember, we also expected cases to go up slightly as we reopened the economy and as people started to engage more. So that's going to happen. That's why we wanted to do this in a staged fashion. And the final point I'll make is that I do believe there's a seasonal effect here. We don't know how much that's going to come into play, how robust that's going to be. But coronaviruses don't typically circulate in the summer. And so as we reopen into the warm summer months and move more activities outside, we're going to catch a break. And that's going to be a backstop against some spread that might have happened otherwise.
There are some who think it may not spread very much longer at all. A former WHO director, I'm not sure if you've seen this comment or not, said there's a, quote, real chance the virus could, quote, burn out before we get a vaccine, that more people are immune than we think. I'm curious your thoughts before I get to our Twitter questions.
I think it's unlikely that we have a level of immunity across the United States that gives us anything approaching herd immunity. When we do the seroprevalence studies, I would expect it to be about 5% nationally, but a lot higher in hotspots like New York City. I would expect it could be as high as 30%. Cities like Detroit and Los Angeles and Boston could be 10%. So there are cities that have exposure, but not enough really to reduce the chains of transmission outside of perhaps New York City, where exposure is much higher. I think we will see it burn out to a degree in July and August. I think we're going to see transmission break off in the depth of the summer, just as we've seen with other respiratory pathogens, even in the pandemic flu strain in 2009, H1N1. But we're still at risk in the fall, and I think we need to be very careful heading into the fall, coming off the summer. Hopefully we'll have a quiescent summer where we can get back to normal activity and relax a little bit again. But we're going to need to be very careful in the fall that we could have continued outbreaks of this. And so that's the risk we're facing after the summer. But hopefully this will be a successful summer and a successful reopening.
Our viewers were very excited at the opportunity, Dr. Gottlieb, to ask you questions tonight. I've got a few for you. I'm going to start with Jim Carroll, who said, what is the history, Dr. Gottlieb, of vaccine development for coronaviruses like SARS and MERS? Is it different this time? Best I know, we've never developed a vaccine for a coronavirus, have we?
We haven't. We haven't necessarily tried. There were vaccines in development against MERS that looked good in preclinical work, but we've never successfully developed a vaccine clinically for any coronavirus. That doesn't mean we're not going to be able to do it. And in fact, as I said, I think that there's good preclinical and now clinical evidence that you can develop an immune reaction with a vaccine construct. We've developed drugs that looked successful against coronavirus in the past, particularly an antibody-based drug by Regeneron that they successfully developed and tested in large animals. They never tested it in humans, but it looked successful in animal models.
I have a question from Atal Raviv, who looks like he may be a medical doctor. Says, Dr. Gottlieb, if you were in charge of a federal strategy to open schools in the fall, what testing strategy would you recommend? Point of care, antigen testing daily, nasal swab weekly, no testing, just masks and smaller classes. What would you say?
I think schools are going to look to dedensify the classroom. They're going to look to keep students in smaller groups and not have them intermingle as much to reduce social spreading within the school. I think there is going to be testing put into some of the schools. I know some states are looking at that. There's recommendations going forth to governors to implement testing regimens. It's probably going to be something that's more of a random sampling and testing regimen rather than testing everyone once a week or testing people daily. Certainly that's going to be, I think, pretty intrusive and also pretty expensive to do. But I think you could see some random sampling, some random testing to try to reduce the risk that you could have large outbreaks in a school that are going undetected. Remember, what you're trying to guard against, because we know a lot of the spread among kids, insofar as there is spread, is probably asymptomatic spread. What you're trying to guard against is an outbreak in the school that might go undetected. And so if you do some random sampling in the school, you can probably protect against that.
Finally tonight, a question from Doug Thomas. There's so much unknown, as you know, Dr. Gottlieb, about this virus. He asks, can the virus spread through sweat glands? Interesting question. What's your answer?
As best I know, the answer is no. This is a respiratory pathogen. It's primarily spread through respiratory droplets.